Welcome to Hello Kind Soul Podcast, where we raise the vibration of kindness on a global scale. I'm Dr. Ebony Green, your host, and I'm super excited to be with you today. If you want to follow us on all major platforms, look us up at Hello Kind Soul Podcast. And if you want to follow me, look me up at E Green Equity. I hope you enjoy the episode. Have a great day. Welcome to Hello Kind Soul Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Ebony Green. We are here to raise the vibration of kindness on a global scale, y'all. So if you have not had a chance, please check out our website at hellokindsoul.com. I'd love to think about and imagine what the world could be if we all showed up as our best self, right? Our kindest self. So for today's episode, I'm going to share with you a meme that I read probably a week ago and in my travels. And it said something to the effect of, imagine if we measured success by the safety people felt in your presence. And when I read it, I paused because I was like, oh gosh. And it made me really think about how do we create space for people to feel safe with you around, right? And then it made me think about the moments in life where I'm engaging with someone and I know I don't feel a sense of peace or a sense of safety. And it's that moment where, and most people would term it as psychological safety, right? And we can talk about and probably dissect the different types of people who feel it when, but I think just to sit for a minute and hover around this notion of one, if we measured success that way, right, where it wasn't necessarily focused on profits over people, but we reprioritize that people, caring for our people will increase our profits, right? And in that regard, that would be the measure that we're using, right? That success is that we create a place, a space, an organization, an institution, an environment where people feel safe to dream in color, safe to imagine, safe to iterate. And that in itself would allow us to actually do more in this world than a place where people feel stifled to share their thoughts out loud in real time, right? And so the idea that everything we do in this world is really measured, right, in some way, shape, or form, and from weight to height to performance, right? There's always this way that we're measuring output and productivity and profits and success, but we I've rarely seen the piece of the importance of measurement included in the way that we create space for people to feel a sense of comfort. And it just really sat with me because part of the goal, I would think, of this podcast and basically what we do no matter what spaces we're in is to always enter those spaces with a humble heart, right? And leaning into the values of compassion and imagination and creativity and innovation and empathy, right? And love being the highest frequency and really taking that seriously in the ways that we move through the world. And then I realized that for the most part, I don't know if there's an institution that really measures success in that way. And then it made me think about okay, how would we measure that? What would be the indicators of success? And so, part of what I've been playing with lately, y'all, is really this idea of creating and engineering your own imagination. And Hello Kind Soul is truly the manifestation of my imagination. And then the beauty of it is it gets iterated on by different people who are close to me in the circle, work for the company to really kind of add and make it better. But that there will absolutely be a marker in terms of how we measure the ways in which we kind of create the environment to thrive. Multiple times people have heard me say that we're so hyper fixated on the fruit that we often forget to think about the soil and how we tend to the soil. And so the second part of that meme where it says, if measurement was based on the safety someone felt in your presence, made me think about the soil, right? Here is the piece that I think is important to think about and kind of be curious about, is that if we in ourselves and inside don't feel a sense of peace and safety and comfort and don't feel nurtured, is it actually possible to create a space for others to feel that? And I don't know if that's possible, right? When I think about the people that I'm so comfortable being around, because every time I'm around them, I never feel a sense of judgment or disregard or the worry of how they're going to say things or what they're going to say out of their mouth, that type of vibe. I realize that most of those people have done a great amount of work on themselves, that they've spent a lot of time engaging on their own healing journey, that they've worked through some of their triggers and traumas, that they're honest about where they are on that continuum. They're very intentional about checking in on themselves about how far down the line they've gone and what work they need to continue to engage in, what work they felt that they've satisfied. But all of that ability to create that space really comes down to working on yourself. Some of it's just figuring out what ego is and how that lives in your body for real. But certainly, I don't think most of the people in the world think about this idea of measuring, but I do believe that most people in the world are good people, who are well-intentioned people, who want to create that. But I don't know if it's at the top of mind, right? Like how I engage others or how I prepare the table for others to feel, so to speak, wasn't something that was top of mind. But when I read the meme in my mind, I was like, oh, like this really matters a lot. How we show up and create space for other people to be their most authentic self is really, really important, right? And I remember having a conversation with someone who was really kind of going through some stuff. In fact, they're still kind of going through some stuff. And so we were chatting on the phone for a really long time. And, one of the things he said was like, thanks for picking up. And I was like, you're welcome. Like, why would I not pick up, right? And when we talked, I said, maybe you should, try to find a therapist that can really help you think through your thought process and really help you siphon through your stuff. And his thought was, oh, but I have you. So let me be really clear, y'all. I am not a therapist. So you can call me all you want. I can listen to you till the cows come home. I give you the advice I have. I am not a therapist. I'm very transparent to say that I am not equipped with the tools of an actual therapist. But here's the reason I'm sharing this story, because I think in his mind, when you think of therapy, part of the person the part of you that's going to that person is the person that makes you feel most comfortable to tell the truth, to tell your truth. And so there was something in our interaction, something with regard to the way that he trusts me and I trust him, that in his mind, I played that role for him. Now, I did give the continued gentle nudge because I genuinely do believe that this healing work, while it can be done, parts of it on your own, it's really important to have, or I would advise folks to really engage in therapy. I've said it multiple times. I think it's really important. I think to be in community with someone who has the tools or equipped with the tools to help you is super important. But I understood what he was saying and I appreciated it. And in his mind, here's this person I could call who doesn't judge me, who listens, who then can help me kind of think through what I'm thinking out loud. And so it made me think about the second piece was like, okay, well, what are the things that people are really looking for when you want to feel a sense of safety in someone's presence? And so the number one thing I think all of us want to feel is that we're not going to be judged, that we can show up as our authentic self, or we can show up struggling, or we can show up in however way we need to show up. And the person that we're talking to, the person's presence that we're in, cares about us enough to not attribute judgment to our statements, our actions, or our thoughts, especially in time when we're sort of falling apart, right? Like when there's times where we're struggling with ourselves, when there's times that we're struggling with our worth, when there's times that we've made a mistake and we are embarrassed about that mistake or we feel bad about that. Like knowing that the person I'm going to call is the person that's going to bring me a sense of peace with regard to judgment is super important, right? And so the question for those of you out there listening is like, do you provide a space that folks who you would consider, let's just do your community, when they reach out to you, do they feel a sense of not judgmental engagement? Two, I would think I want to feel loved no matter what spaces I'm in. But if I'm talking with someone about something that makes me feel vulnerable or disclosing like my thoughts or things that I'm troubled with, I would want to know that I feel a sense of love from that person listening, right? A caring stance, a caring disposition, a nurturing stance, right? That I can kind of say, here's what I'm going through. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking. And I know that whatever you respond, even if it's critical, is from a place of love. Like I can feel that in our interaction, that you care deeply about my well-being. So no matter what you say to me, even when it doesn't feel good to my ears, I know it's anchored in love. And I've said this before, but thinking that you're showing up with love and actually helping people feel love are two different things. There are a lot of people who would say, oh, but people can come to me. I would love them through it. I'll be there for them. But when people show up, they don't feel that way. And so for those of you out there trying to figure out, well, what does this look like? Like when I say they feel loved, what does that look like, sound like to you in your mind's eye when people come and engage you, right? The third thing I think is that sense of safety is rooted in feeling like when I tell you something, it doesn't go to 4,000 other ears. Like if I come to you to have a vulnerable conversation, no matter what it is, because not all vulnerable conversations are negative or I got in trouble, or like sometimes vulnerable conversations are the things that are in the quiet of the night that you're pondering. It could be starting a new business, which is still a very vulnerable thought when people have expectations of how you need to move through the world, right? So if in fact that happens, do I know when I talk to you and tell you my truth or my thoughts that they stay with you and they don't ripple to your friend or your cousin or whomever, right? Are my thoughts safe in your mind? And do I feel they're safe? And this is the thing, perception is reality. So even if all of these things I'm saying, you're like, people feel, they should feel that way because that's what I do. If people don't feel that, if they don't perceive you as offering them that, the likelihood of them feeling comfortable enough to reach out to you is slim to none, even if you're a very well-intentioned person. So the question would be, what is it about me, if I'm you thinking about this, that doesn't make people feel comfortable to tell me things that really matter to them because they don't think I'll keep it quiet, right? Like, what is it that I potentially could shift in the way that I engage with people so that they feel more reassured that if you tell me something, it stays with me, right? And for a lot of people, part of the challenge is that, you know, when you are incubating on an idea, the last thing you need to do is share that with someone who's going to run and tell it to everybody else. If you've made a mistake or an error in judgment or are struggling at work or feeling like you're going to fail your class in college, whatever it is, right? Because these thoughts are from, you know, young to old. You want to be able to express that in a way that allows you to be vulnerable and that you know you're safe. Another thing that is interesting enough is like, do you create a space for me to feel even vulnerable? Like I have some really dope friends, right? And some of those friends, even though amazing human beings, y'all don't take it personal, I'm just going to tell the truth, they're not soft and warm. Like I have some friends that are the other side of soft and warm. They're just not those people, right? And it's not that they're uncaring people or dismissive people or disrespectful people. I'm not saying that at all, right? Because anyone that I hold dear to me, if we talk monthly, weekly, I really value, I care deeply. And even those who I only catch up with once a year, but people I consider in my community, I just think are good people. Not because they're my people, because they're good people. They live good lives. They do good things. They care deeply. But some people aren't warm and fuzzy, right? Like I have some friends that I know if I was to call and be like crying, they'd be like, what's wrong? Man, don't call. Like, you good? Like, stop it. Shake it off. Like they don't know how to be that. They're just not built that way. And it's not that they're not great people. It's that they're just not emotional people. They don't really tap into that emotion piece. And so when we think about, you know, calling someone or reaching out to folks and feeling a sense of peace, the other thing for us to consider is like, what types of peace do we need, right? Because those people who are not warm and fuzzy, some of those people are absolutely the people I might call at a different time. And they're not going to be warm and fuzzy, but I know I'm safe with them. I know that while if I'm crying, they might hand me a tissue and be like, yo, you know, stop crying, right? Like, I also know that they're 10 toes down in solving the problem and assisting and supporting and helping, but they're not the people you call to cry to. So the question is, what does nurturing need to feel like for you to feel safe? And is it always the same, irrespective of the situation? Or do you need different types of people who create different types of safety? Because sometimes there are moments in my life where I just wanted to be safe. I didn't even want to have to talk about it. I just wanted to be safe. And the wild thing is I'm thinking about a person right now who I consider very close to me. And that person is not someone I would call and necessarily be emotional with, but it is someone I might call and be like, I just need to come to your crib and just sit in silence. Like, I'm just stressed. They'd be like, come over. And we may not even talk about it, but I know being in their space is a safe space for me to just be and decompress and get my thoughts together. In fact, that was absolutely a role they played several years back in my life, right? So when we're thinking about this notion of like safety, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think safety is like number one. Like I can't do anything else if I'm not safe. And it's not just physical safety, which we often, think about. When you think of safety, you're like, are you physically safe? And for me, honestly, y'all, I'm more worried to be emotionally safe than physically safe. I'm less likely to feel physically unsafe out in the streets, but I'm very aware of how dangerous it is to be around people who are mentally don't keep you safe. Because those are things that you don't actually see. They're not on the surface, the harm that can be caused. So thinking about, who are those people who are able to nurture you in whatever ways you need? Because not all y'all are me. Like I'm an artist. I'm sensitive. I like to hug. I like to be emotional. I like to sit in my heart space. But let me be really honest. I like to sit in my heart space. For decades, I did not. For decades, I did not know that I was disconnected from my emotions. So understand that, I now am very proud of the fact that I actually can feel pain and sadness and happiness and joy, because for decades I couldn't. And I'm not that old, y'all. I'm still under 50 years old. But it wasn't until about 10 years ago that I actually could tap into emotions because of, if you read the book, right? My dad died when I was 7, and that kind of set off a chain reaction. If you don't have the book, get it. Acts of Liberation's phenomenal read. Not because I wrote it, but because it will help you kind of figure your stuff out, hopefully. And so for me, I think a badge of honor has been that to go through this healing journey to a place where you can actually feel your emotions and express them and be honest about them. But that's just for me. I'm not saying you need to do that. But what I am saying is that each of us have a way to deal with stuff, and each of us have a definition of what it feels like to be safe. The way I used to say it when I do trainings is like, an insider feeling is one of safety. It's like if you're in the winter with a nice heavy jacket, right? Everything's warm. You feel held, cared for. You're not, your lips aren't moving because you feel safe and you're warm. Conversely, outsider, like not feeling safe, is like being out in the cold with a t-shirt on. You're freezing, you're uncomfortable, right? That's the level of safety we're looking at and we're thinking about. And so for those of y'all out there, what do you need to feel a sense of safety? What do you need to be able to show up and be vulnerable, to be yourself, to be transparent? And it doesn't mean that you have to show up and be vulnerable every day. But what I am saying is that we all have these moments in life where sometimes stuff falls apart, and that's just what it is. And when you are looking for someone to help you rebuild or repair it or figure it out, what is that? What are the characteristics of that person need to be? And more importantly, can you have those characteristics and be that for someone else? Because this other idea of measuring success would be that there would be a marker that all of us are under. There's a benchmark or an indicator that all of us are clear means I'm safe. This is how we measure success in regards to feeling safe or providing safety. And we'd all be really aware of it, right? When we're at jobs, we know like these are the 3 things you need to do to get a satisfaction or exceeding or whatever the measure is. And so I wanted to share that today because it just really sat with me for a long time, and I'm still chewing on it. Like, I don't know how often we're intentionally creating space for people to feel safe, but I think it's about time that we sit with ourselves and figure out what are we doing? Are we doing the things we want to do intentionally, or are we hoping that we do this thing and not really thinking about it deeply and working through like, where do I need to? When do I need to? Because the other thing that comes to mind is there's certain days I would love to believe that I'm always able to provide that safety for people so that they feel in my presence safe. But there are days where I'm having off days, right? And so realistically, there are also days that I don't have the capacity to be that for other people. And if that's the case, my point to you is, are you self-aware enough to know when you no longer have the capacity for whatever reason, whatever's going on in your life, to do that for other people? And once you're self-aware enough to know that, do you make sure that if someone comes to you, you're able to say like, I really want to be there for you today, but I'm struggling right now, and it obviously depends on the situation, but are you aware enough to know when your capacity is low or high? And what does that look like? How do you communicate that in a way that's still warm and caring? How do you make sure that the world that we want to live in is the world that we want to offer? So like, I want to create safety, but I also want to live in safe spaces. And so this idea of like Hello Kind Soul being a brand, which is about raising the vibration of kindness, is not an accident, because each of us individually have a role to play in doing that. And this notion about shifting the perspective on our values is so critical, right? When we prioritize people over profits, we can recognize that when I pour into these people, it is more likely to get better profits because they're whole beings that are fed and feeling well and feeling cared for. And in that moment, I tend to give you my best. But when I'm exhausted or depleted, or I feel as if I can't do this very thing that you're asking me to do, I don't know if the outcome is really what you want it to be. So, so I guess the question as we wrap it up is really about like, how do you create a safe space for other people? Is that intentional? Are you working on really being aware and self-aware about how you show up? Does it require you to move out of egoic stance to realize that we're living our lives, or I believe that most of us, if not all of us, should be living our lives in service of making the world a better place so that everybody's good? What does that look like, feel like, and sound like for you? And if you're not there and you don't feel like you create a safe space, because some of you all are going to listen to this and be like, you know what, maybe I don't. And I mean to, but I don't. Cool. If you realize that you're not doing something you want to do, the beauty of that is that the next second after that awareness, you can start to think about what that safe space could look like. Think about how you can alter what you're currently doing to provide opportunities for other folks to really feel safe. Think about how you value being able to pick up a phone and call someone, or being at work and know that your boss is compassionate and that there's this safe space where you don't feel judgment because you're not perfect, because none of us are, right? Basically, create the world that you want to live in for others. It's real simple. And if you don't know how to do that, take your time to self-reflect. Think about what you need to be cared for. The things I shared with you today was less about all the answers and more about what I potentially, here are some things that I might need to feel safe, which are the very things that I want to make sure I cultivate and create so others can feel safe. So I hope you're having a great day, kind soul. I will circle back next week with another awesome episode. Again, if you have not got your merch, go to hellokindsoulmerch.com. If you want to check out our services, we now offer Hello Kind Soul coaching, which I'm super excited about. You can find that at hellokindsoul.com. Until next week, have an amazing week, and don't allow anyone to take the J out of your joy. Peace.